any craziness before it happens. So thank you everyone for being here. This is really exciting. I think we've been talking a lot about end users of research, clients, end users, whatever you prefer in terms of terminology. But I think it's really important to hear directly from you guys, because you are the ones that are on the receiving end, or in a good or bad way, of supplier marketing. So I'm really excited that you're all here. By way of introductions, on the end is Adrian Sforza of Reader's Digest Association, then Tina Nathanson of AIG, Edwin Roman of ESPN, and Marcy Updike of GenRe. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to start it out a little open-ended, and I'm going to ask you, and you can go in whatever order. Everyone doesn't have to answer every question. Think of this as a conversation, not a formal thing. But perhaps you could describe a day in the life of a client-side researcher for everyone. Anybody?
I'll start. Hi, I'm Tina. First thing I just want to say is thank you for inviting me. And that don't assume we have millions and millions of dollars to spend. We get budget cuts all the time. So I just want to sort of preface that. But sometimes the money fairy comes like magic, and then we'll call you and say, I have $1 million to spend. How do we spend it in 2 months? So, but typically, I've been on the corporate side and supplier side. I started my career on the supplier side, and then I got the 7-year itch and went to corporate for about 12, 13 years, and then went back to supplier, and then back to corporate. So I've seen it all at different levels. And there is no typical day in the life. And we have our ups and downs. Your CMO can walk into the office and want something immediately. But then there's something that is just going to sit and sit and sit and sit and never get done. And we try to be as kind as we possibly can. But I will say there is no typical day in the life. And I don't know if you all agree with me.
I'll jump in. Edwin also had a similar path where I started on the supplier side. So certainly know both sides of the fence. Been at ESPN for 11 years, so probably know the corporate side a little bit more. But I think it's really interesting to note that we wear a lot of different hats. Number one, we're internal partners. We're basically doing what you're doing. We're marketing to our internal clients, and that's really, really important. We're managing client relationships. We're bridging client groups. I think we spend half our time just people managing, making sure that marketing is talking to production and production is talking to programming. And I think that takes up a lot of our time. The second piece is project managers. We have a number of primary research projects that are happening at the same time at different phases. So we need to make sure those things are happening on schedule, are happening to, obviously, our level of expectation. And then finally, we're strategists. We're working with our external partners, trying to come up with strategic and tactical things that we can share with our internal clients. So we really leverage the people in this room to make us smarter. So thank you for that, by the way. And then I think the last piece is just we're magicians, and you guys could probably agree. Clients sometimes don't know what they want, right? And I'm talking about internal. You're talking about sort of on the outside going into the corporate side. So we spend a lot of time telling our clients what they think they want, and sometimes telling them what they don't need. I think sometimes people rely on research too much, and there's a difference between being smart about what you're doing and then using sort of your business acumen. So all those things kind of take up our day, so to speak. And that's just Monday. You want to tell them about Tuesday?
Yeah. I don't know how many of you are familiar with GenRe at all. It's a reinsurance company, so it's owned by, it's a Berkshire Hathaway company. It's owned by Warren Buffett. But so the reason why I mention that is because some of what we do is business to business, and then some of what we do is business to consumer. The research, whatever I'm involved in, and I feel like I'm spinning.
These things are very slippery, by the way, too.
They're not comfortable.
Can we stand?
Yeah.
Can we literally stand?
Yeah,
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm going to stand.
Yeah, I won't
Because one of
get
us
so
is going
dizzy.
to fall.
One of us is going to fall.
Yeah.
I mention that because I may be working on a project that involves seniors, 65 and older. It could be business people that I'm trying to conduct research with. It could be your general consumer. It really runs the gamut. But I think in my role at the company, it's primarily working with people internally and representing what research can do for them. At our company, there's a lot of actuaries, underwriters, claims people, product developers, but they don't always think about the consumer side or what the agents may be asking for, and like that. So when I'm in a meeting with them, I'm finding out what their strategic goals are, and then I'm trying to bring in the research side of it. And then similar to what these guys have talked about, trying to represent, okay, what can research provide and how can it be used?
Okay.
Oh, hi everyone, I'm Adrienne. I work for Reader's Digest. And when I tell people that I work for Reader's Digest, they say either one of two things. I love your magazine, or my grandmother loved your magazine. I started about a year ago, and I also, like everybody else on the panel, ran the gamut of ethnographic research, supplier side, brand consultancy, advertising. I hit everything, and then I finally took on a position at Reader's Digest. And for me in particular, the challenge is I took over for someone who had been at the company for 25 years, and I always say that everybody at that company was a victim of Stockholm Syndrome because he was very rigid in his research when I came on board. And I started talking to the editors about different things we can do. We have 9 publications, so it's pretty large. And they were like, we can do that? I didn't know you can do that kind of research. And I've been trying to really shore up the company and the market research as far as finding the right vendors, finding the right partners, trying to bring Reader's Digest to a different audience, trying to bring the age down of the average Reader's Digest reader. So, for me, a day in the life, it's been about a year since I've been there, and I think we finally have a grasp on everything. But it's really important for me, and I love to talk to vendors, and I love to talk to the right partners who I really feel can help us take this, very well-known heritage brand and, work on some of the content, tweaking it to appeal to a younger audience and different types of content that might be different from what your grandmother used to read 30 years ago. So that's a day in my life, is just trying to, make editors happy, make our consumers happy, work with our vendors to make everybody happy.
Great, thanks. So you're all clearly very busy. So when you receive marketing messages from suppliers, how do you, with limited time, how do you filter, how do you decide what to pay attention to and what not to?
Delete. Honestly, I'm sorry, but I'll be completely candid. When I get an email,
We're in Vegas, right? We're in Vegas?
Yeah, right. If I get an email from somebody I have never talked to before, I've never met at a conference, I'm not paying any attention to the email. And if anything, it goes in sort of my pain in the butt sort of category, and probably less likely to maybe approach them at a meeting or at a conference if they do have a table there, because I get inundated with them. And then the LinkedIn requests that I get inundated with people I've never met before, I've never even heard of their company before. I love the call of the person who calls up and says, I'd like to learn more about your company and tell you something about ours. Can we schedule some time? Well, actually, in talking to them, they're not the person that works for the company. They're a telemarketer who's calling to try and schedule for somebody. And I understand the reason why they have to do it that way. I understand that, but that's not going to help me at all.
I think recognize all of that. We're very well intentioned in terms of what we're trying to do, and I agree with you 100% that it's really hard. For me, phone calls are a complete miss. So if you're trying to call me, forget about it. It's a really difficult medium for us because to talk to you on the spot or set something up doesn't really work. Emails are more troublesome one because I have met potential partners through email, but again, we get so many. Just as an experiment, I started counting the number of messages I got in my inbox since this session started at 9. I think I'm like 10 to 15 in the range. And that's just today, and that happens every single day. So if you start doing the math Monday through Friday, there's just so many. So we're almost forced to keep hitting delete, delete, delete. So really thinking about, as I was saying earlier in the panel, in some of the sessions about, marketing the why. Think about the real estate. The subject line is very critical, and obviously the first line is very critical. And making sure that the messages that you're sending aren't just generic and mass, because I definitely don't respond to anything that looks like it's just a formula or a template. Those things I delete even faster. Looking for things that make more of a personal connection.
Yeah, and same like know your customer. So if we're targeting you as a customer in the client world, you'd want the same thing. And just because my job title says I'm a global research director or customer experience or something, don't assume I'm an operations specialist, that I know the call center operations, because I've gotten 15 LinkedIn messages and they're not in the United States. Most of my hits are from outside the US. So I guess it's a good thing because you're all in the US right now. But it's hard, you just delete. And so you need to also know your customer.
Yeah. And I think, I think it's fair to say that we've all been in market research at least 10 years. And I'm sure, like myself, I have a Rolodex of people that I've worked with in the past that I know really well, and they know me and they know my business. So, but I mean, I always welcome emails and calls when somebody calls me and says, hey, let me help you set up some focus groups. Well, I can do that myself. I can call the facility myself, and I already have a recruiter. So I think it's fair to say that most of us probably have people that we've worked with and that we trust. And I think to Edwin's point about having it not be so generic and somebody emailing me and saying, hey, let me help you with this. I always respond better to somebody who will say, I know Taste of Home is one of your magazines, and we recently did a study on cooking among millennials. I'd love to share that with you. That will pique my interest if you target something. We have 9 publications, or we have a gardening magazine. We recently ran a study on this, and I'd love to share it with you. Something that is really relevant to my business, not just, hey, I'd love to show you how we can set up community boards. So I think that's really important. And those are the emails that I always respond to, because I feel like they took the time to get to know my business, went to rd.com and said, wow, they have 9 publications. Let me see how I can fit what I do into some of their magazines.
I would have to say, I think every vendor we've used, thinking back at least the last 5 years, we've only used them because I've met them at a conference. I happened to sit next to them at lunch and had a great conversation with them, or I heard them present on something, or they came to our office because they had something to share with us. They had something to educate us on. I don't think I've ever picked a vendor because they sent me an email or they made a phone call, at least in the last 5 years. So I think, Dana, you mentioned it in your presentation, going to the local events where you can meet with other researchers.
Yes.
They all,
Absolutely.
each market seems to have them supporting the local groups. It really does mean a lot, and that's really where I will spend time meeting with somebody, and then I may respond to your email or your phone call after that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Most of my contacts that I've had for the last 5 to 10 years and beyond are people that I've met at events, or Essemer has events, plug into your local events research now. Even today, I've met a bunch of really great people just sitting and chatting over breakfast, having a conversation. It's just so much easier when you meet somebody face to face, because then you can really get a sense and you can have a conversation about what your businesses can bring to the table.
So go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to mention, I think a lot of companies these days, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like a lot of the suppliers that we've been talking to, they have a salesperson that will reach out and they try and make a connection and stuff. I'm not opposed to that model, and then maybe you get passed off to somebody in your own company. But I will say this: I've been around long enough. I'm really looking for someone who's going to teach me something. So to have the salesperson contact me and develop a relationship, I can go out to lunch with people all day, all week if I want to. But I'm really not interested in a free lunch. Maybe every once in a while, but I really want somebody to challenge the way I'm thinking and teach me something new. So you know what? If the salesperson has to come to make that connection, that's fine, but bring somebody with you who knows more than I do. And
I'll build on it, because I think it's learning something, but also being honest. There are a lot of people that say, oh, ESPN is such a great brand, and we can do great research to tell you how great you are. We don't really care. Not that we don't care, I shouldn't say that out loud. We care about managing a great brand, right? But the thing is, I have more respect for the people, or I give more attention to the people that say, here's something challenging that I saw with ESPN, or here's something that I personally thought, ESPN didn't necessarily do correctly. And we look for those challenging news. As a consumer insights person, obviously we're thinking about the great things that make ESPN, but we're looking for those emerging cracks for our brand. So if I have a partner that's willing to be honest with me before they even really know me, they're going to be honest with me when we're actually in that relationship. So that's a big differentiator for me.
So thinking about the partners you're working with now, can you think back to what they did right?
Yeah, I can think of a couple, actually. I think number one is building a relationship with them initially, and a lot, it was all said now, having that common thread. I used to work for MasterCard, and everybody knows Priceless, but if somebody said, oh, I heard about this new technology, or I just downloaded this app and I'm trying Uber for the first time, which, a couple of years ago when it didn't exist, I didn't really use it, they're telling me about it and their experience. It's like they're engaging me. Then you're bringing me in. Building relationships in some way that's a sort of spark is really, really helpful. I won't respond to a cold call. And another good best practice is case studies. And there's a couple of vendors that I work with that have an online webinar model that works really well, and they had a summer session through the whole summer. And I won't say the vendor, but I had worked with them in the past, but I engaged other people, because I'm fairly new at my job at AIG, other people on my team to watch these webinars and participate so that they became aware of what they do. Case studies, and also they did it in person. So have a case study where you're not just presenting the case as the supplier, but you're actually bringing a couple of your clients, or you're having a consortium where you're meeting other clients and we're talking together and sharing our challenges. It just creates another network opportunity rather than you just speaking to clients just by yourself and presenting a case study. Just one more point I did want to make, and it was mentioned earlier in the survey with the CMO survey. Comment that I made was about how bigger suppliers are trying to be boutique-y, and smaller, really tiny suppliers are really salesy. If you're a 1, 2, 3-person shop, you sound like just pushing it to me. You have to find a happy medium between there and make it really differentiated and compelling, and do something that it makes it so worth actually that I would want to work for you. And it's happened where I've actually interviewed, and I interviewed for a position at a company that I didn't get the job, but I said if I would want to work for you totally, but I would totally hire you. So, something like that is completely, totally differentiating for me.
So if you were to start working for a supplier tomorrow, what would you do to market your services?
I would go to as many in-person networking events as I can. That's how I've always, even when I was on my own as a consultant, when I worked in branding, when I worked in I always went to every networking event that I could at night to meet people and build. I say Rolodex. I know I actually still have a Rolodex, but from years ago, to build a Rolodex of people, because you never know. Today client, tomorrow supplier, your supplier, tomorrow client. You never know where life is going to take you, and you never know the connections that you make. And I always link in with people that I meet, because you never know down the road when you may need that person, or somebody said something at a meeting, wow, I know that person does this really cool thing that I should really pursue a little bit more. So I would say in person, I would do as much in-person networking as possible.
I would say in-person relationships are definitely important. Try to be friends before we start dating. I think that's also critical. I think people just want to cut to the chase too fast, but think about it a little bit. I won't go further with that analogy. What's been mentioned a little bit, but the case studies I think are also critical, whether it's something in person, whether it's something that's done as a webinar, whether it's something that's written in an article. But the client involvement I think is really critical too. So having a supplier and also a client connected to that case study, so you're sort of seeing both sides of the equation, speaks volumes.
It's credibility too.
Yep.
And yeah, definitely the in-person meeting and everything, but I would really encourage you to produce some of your own research that you can present at a conference, because that speaks to your credibility, it speaks to your level of expertise, and it gives me a sense for the type of work you can do. So I would also encourage you to do that and get at some of these national conferences and get on the agenda and present. And for me, I really want somebody to challenge my way of thinking. We work with 2 vendors right now, and one of the vendors, several years ago, we were coming out with a phone survey, 6,000 interviews that we wanted to complete. Now that may be really small for some of you in here, but I thought that was a fairly large project. And the vendor that we ended up using for the phone surveys was the only one out of all the ones we talked to that challenged us on how we were setting it up and how we were, some of the screeners that we had, and then also the timeline that we had. The other ones, they didn't ask. They just quickly shot off their proposal, and then they called up and said, okay, so how does our price compare? Well, your price was fine, it compared, but what about all these other things that you neglected to say? You didn't even ask me questions on. And this one company that got the business, we now send them business all the time. We don't even quote the jobs if it's a particular type of job. So really challenge us and again, teach us. At least that's what I want.
I know these guys are dying to ask you some questions, so we're going to open it up right here.
Hi, you mentioned conferences. There are a billion conferences out there. What, for each of you, can you name like the top 2 or 3 conferences that you consider ones that we should present at or go to or whatever?
I always go to the SMR, and I go. I'm sorry.
The Congress in Dublin.
Yep. They have them here, and I also the Research Now conferences. I also go to a lot, and then Advertising Week is coming up, so my email box is already filled with, cocktails and pizzas and all this other. So I'll try to attend as many of those I can too.
The IIEX. Quirks was really good.
Quirks is a great one.
Quirks
is a
was
great
really,
one.
really good last year.
It's coming up again soon.
Brooklyn, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good one. And I presented at the Congress last year, but I can't go this year, unfortunately. SMR is great too.
It's pretty similar. IIEX definitely, as a Green Book board member, I have to say that. Also, no, but I truly mean it because I think it's one of the most progressive ones out there. I also went to Quirks because obviously I want to be well-rounded in terms of the different types of vendors and partners that exist, doing a lot of intellectual window shopping. I have to be honest because I think IIEX does differentiate itself, and a lot of the others, it's not necessarily like the conference. Sometimes I can find I could go to a name it research conference and then get a lot out of it, and then go to the same conference the following year and get maybe very little out of it. So it really depends on who's on the agenda. And so I kind of scour the names and look for people that might be bringing a different type of thinking to the table, and that's how I might pick a conference. So we kind of spread it around a little bit.
I would say the CRC. I honestly will look at the agenda and see how many corporate researchers are on the agenda. And that's usually where I start, but the CRC, the Quarks was mentioned. AMA also puts on some great, more like a workshop type conferences, but I'll send my team members to those.
I'm going to the market research event this year for the first time in, I think, 15 years.
Yeah, I've heard that's
So
a
I'm
good
very curious to see how that is.
Just to build on that, one thing I've noticed is that when I've gone to local conferences, I see some clients that aren't at the big conferences, because you guys being so busy, sometimes you can't get out to the big conferences. So I would definitely encourage people to check out some of the local MRA, local AMA, things like that.
Hi, you guys mentioned the conferences. So when you go to conferences, what is it that you're looking for? Are you doing the trade show booth experience, or are you looking for the people that are on the speaking panels or the thought leadership sessions?
Thought leadership. I actually skipped almost all the trade show stuff at the IIEX. So I walked around. I don't need another tchotchke or maybe a shiny new object, but it was meeting people that was most important. I mean, if you're active in social media, I'm pretty active in social media, so people were coming up to me and saying, "Oh, you're Christina Nathanson." So I got to meet a lot of people that I had never met before, including Dana. And so I would seek out that first and not go so much.
I have 2 little kids, a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old, so I will do the trade show route. I am looking for little nuggets that I can take home and give them. They're thrilled. They think
I'll give you mine.
Yeah, they think it's a gift. But if I'm going to those, it's more to pick up a piece of candy or something like that. I'm really looking more for people who are on the agenda, hear what they have to say. I will go to the booths. If you actually have a piece of research at the booth, like, probably would, I don't know if you guys actually usually have a booth, but if you did and you had that report there, I would probably go to the booth just to pick up the report and maybe make a connection that way. But I'll admit I have 2 little kids and I will pick up the little trinkets.
I have a 5-year-old, but I still skip the booth. I would say the proof is in the pudding. I think one of the hardest thing about trying to vet out a potential partner is that a lot of what's presented is very theoretical. And when I can see it applied, that makes a ton of difference. So I'm really looking for the partners that are out there, whether it's a case study or whether you're solo, just kind of showcasing who you are, and not in a sort of buzzword bingo sort of way, but in a real meaningful, like tangible way. So I can see, all right, I see what they did there, maybe a different category, maybe a different industry, but the way they approached it was really interesting, or they were just critical about how they thought about the problem, and I'm looking for that ability to extrapolate back to my business. So the proof is in the pudding, definitely for me.
I think we have a question over here.
Yeah, do you have any suggestions for how to deal with when we get RFPs or RFIs through procurement? How to work within that structure while still getting our message and methodologies and expertise to you people?
We don't have a, what did you call it?
Procurement.
Oh, yeah, we don't have one of those departments. So, yeah. I should say one that I have to use. I'm sure, I mean, it's a Berkshire Hathaway company. I know there's a legal department someplace. But so it's me. I don't have to take it other than it stops with me. So I can't speak to that, I guess.
Yeah.
So
I could speak to it. Can I speak freely here? It's like an anal probe. It's like an anal probe. I have a particular supplier that we finally got on board just shortly after I joined AIG, that it took probably a year, almost a year and a half to get them on board. And because there was 2 components, there was like a SaaS agreement and a master service agreement. And if it weren't for that supplier being transparent through the entire process, and I think basically they can write the book of frequently asked questions for any client. If you want to know what it is, you can ask me later. You guys, I'll tell you. But it's difficult because then it puts me in a bind because I want to work with you and I can't because procurement's saying, oh, we have, you have A, B, C, and D already on board. They can do a focus group. And I said, well, not really. I want to do this improv kind of thing and I want to work with Firefly. They don't do the same thing. Or I want to work with so-and-so and they don't do it. So, yeah, so it's not always our fault, but I know that the ICANN that Green Book is doing, they're doing something that I encourage them to also talk to procurement people as they're going through and understanding how to get on new, if you want to get on board with clients that have difficult processes.
More questions?
Would you agree that if you actually have a supplier who is differentiating, who is really, providing something unique and meaningful that you have, that it shouldn't take you long to convince procurement? Because that's I always think that it's almost like a line of defense. I don't want to work with you because, the procurement process. Mm-hmm. But we've had instances when it was like within 1 or 2 days because they really wanted to work with us.
I mean, we don't have procurement. My boss and I make the final decision on suppliers. That we just require that our vendors sign an NDA, so we don't have this laborious process.
Insurance companies are a little more rigorous, and other financial companies. There could be something, seriously, like if you're on the no-fly list, I'm making it up, you can't do research in certain countries, and if you do research in certain countries, they won't allow us to work, or you need to have insurance. I can't see someone, like if you're a one-off, to hold $1 million worth of insurance. I mean, that's a lot of money, or $2 million worth of insurance. So, yeah, if I want to work with you, I'm going to work with you. I'll do my hardest to do that, yeah.
Tom? Oh,
I have a
you
quick-
first, then Tom.
Quick question. Edwin, ESPN presents at a lot of conferences, and Tina, I know you've presented at conferences. What do you get out of presenting? Because there are some conferences ESPN can have 2 separate presentations, thinking of the MRA events.
Yeah, I think what we get out of presenting is showcasing what we're thinking about and what we're doing. And I talked a lot about sort of tailoring your solutions, knowing what your clients' businesses are like. That's us kind of talking to you about what are the things that are most pressing to us. So obviously those are huge opportunities to visit any ESPN presentation if you would like to work with them. understanding our core business issues. I think that's probably the biggest thing we get from it.
Yeah.
Can any of you mention a specific supplier's campaign or specific advertisement message that has gotten through to you that you find effective?
I can't. I don't think I've paid much attention to any specific advertising, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I get Quirks paper, and I read Quirks cover to cover, and I read everything, trade publications, and I recognize a lot of the names. It's a lot of the names I've known throughout my career, and occasionally I may see something that stands out and it'll stick in my mind a little bit, but I can't recall anything. A lot of the advertising, specifically in Quirks, I use that as a reference, but I know most of the companies already. They're names I've known throughout my research career.
I got one. I got an email, and it said, breakthrough announcement. That's what I remember. Breakthrough announcement. What about? Or let's have coffee. I mean, that was kind of the messages that I hear. I know you're looking for Tom, but those are the kind of things that I have been getting lately. Like, let's meet for coffee. Well, I don't know.
I would say generally there aren't things that break through. I think one thing that actually struck me as a good example was I got some good old-fashioned snail mail from a partner, and they actually hand wrote me a letter. They didn't type it. They actually wrote me a letter. They signed it, and that definitely got my attention. Now I'm going to get probably 50 letters today, but just ruined that one. So that differentiated, going back to the personal connection. I think the other thing not to sort of overlook is just the best marketing is just doing great work, because my best recommendations, no matter what we said here today, are from the people like this sitting to my left and to my right. Like, we love talking to other people that are sort of in the trenches with us and discussing potential partners. Like, we've actually gone as far as setting up sort of a networking exchange with other corporate side researchers, not in a competitive category, and just having a day and talking about who do you work with, what do you like about them, what do they do really well, and kind of going back and forth and exchanging names that way. That's really, really a big piece of how we do sort of our connections.
References are huge for me. I'll call other people I know and say, oh, I need a company that does, this. Can you recommend someone that you've worked with? I use a lot of references from other people. We share a lot of information.
I'll say one more thing too. For me, size doesn't necessarily matter. I know some people will call us up and, at least me up, and say, hey, we're number 5 in the country or whatever and stuff. Honestly, the one company that we give most of our business to, you won't even find on any ranking. And they're a local company that has done right by us and continues to do right by us. And like I said, we don't even shop some of the projects that we're doing because of that. So size isn't, to put that, I would avoid that in your advertising.
Right here.
Hi. So we all, as marketers, we want to do case studies, but our clients don't want to talk about the work that they do. So, and it's interesting that you all want case studies, but if you were asked to participate in a case study, would you allow us to talk about the project? So that's part A of the question. And then part B is, do you, if we use a case study and we have to mask who the client was and we have to be very stealth about the category, do those carry the same amount of weight as a case study that names names?
It doesn't matter to me because I know you have to mask it. I've very rarely seen a case study where people are transparent about what they're doing in their business. So for me, I get the whole confidentiality thing personally.
Same here. I don't need to know who. I don't need to know specifics. I need to know if the methodology worked, what you learned from that, good and bad, and how you'll know that next time we won't do it this way because of such and such. So I don't need to know specifics.
Part C. So if we
True researcher.
So if we were going to do creating content, so a lot of our, I'm from Buzzback Market Research, so a lot of our marketing is content based. So if we were to create content around a case study where we have someone speaking, let's say in a video, about a project that we did, but it's someone from our own company, would you sit through and watch that? Or would you not watch the video because it's someone from
I think it depends on how you engage the end user. If it's just 15 minutes of talking, no. If it's 3 minutes of talking, absolutely. Yeah, like what you should be able to communicate in like 3 slides or something. So I would.
Our biggest challenge always is to get people to talk about the work that we did.
A lot of it's legal. It is legal and compliant, in my case, compliance, but
But I think Marcy said something interesting before, is like if you don't have the ability to showcase a specific project, doing your own original research that showcases your expertise in an area. We're actually working with a partner now who did the very same thing. Like they presented at a CTAM conference, and then they actually took some of the insights they generated in their own instrument, brought it to our team, shared it before there was even any like proposal or bid or RFP set up. And we were just able to see who they were. Again, we were friends before we dated. And I think that's really important too. So there's ways around it.
I think we got a question back here.
So how much time would you say each of you spends on evaluating the future of your departments versus working in them? I was just talking to Marcy earlier that I work for a startup, and I feel like I spend too much time working in the business, not enough time working on the business. And so, you know, a lot of the most influential market researchers on Twitter, I bet none of you have heard of or follow, except for Tina, because I think you are one of them. But we spend all this time thinking about you. How often, outside of the 10 emails that Marcy hits delete on, are you thinking about, you know what, maybe what I'm doing is broken, I do need to be challenged, and are you willing how often are you willing to engage? So one more example before I pause. I did a webinar with live data, live results a couple of weeks ago. 300 people showed up, 20 of them were corporate researchers. Very interesting insight for me. I was talking to myself the whole time. So just be curious if you guys could respond to that point.
And it didn't crash?
The webinar worked perfectly, and it was only 15 minutes long. It was short and sweet.
How come I wasn't there? I spend most of my time focusing on the future. I kind of have that opportunity in a new role, and I'm very lucky to have a manager and his manager, the CMO, to be very eyes wide open. So I was hired as the black sheep, and I will continue to be a black sheep to bring that new thinking. So I really actually don't know a heck of a lot about my business. I'll be straight, I'll be honest. I couldn't even tell you all the products that AIG offers. I know, I'm just kind of in jest, but it's not like a packaged good company. It's very complex, just like Marcy's company, exactly the same model. But I spend most of my time thinking of the future, which I'm very, very lucky.
We do as well. I think we have a really great culture. And one of the sort of mantras of our group is to fail courageously. And every year we kind of look back and think about what did we do that didn't quite work. And it's actually something that we do for some of our partners that we have long-term relationships with, where we'll sit down and do sort of our annual retreat with them and say, you know, what did you do this year that failed? And what did we learn from that failure? So again, I think it's a cultural thing depending on, you know, where you might be fortunate to be working. But at ESPN, we're certainly encouraged to think about things differently and try some things that may or may not work.
Yeah, as us as well. I mean, with our 9 publications, we have millions of subscribers, very loyal, tenured, you know, more than 10-year subscribers. But, you know, I mean, I hate to say it so bluntly, but those people are dying off, right? So, you know, one of the things I've been charged with is understanding the editorial content and how we can tweak it to bring in a younger viewer without pissing off the people who have been subscribing for decades. So, you know, what I work on a lot is content change and understanding what the consumer wants, and, you know, sometimes not even asking the consumer what they want. Let's just change it and see what happens, you know, because you can't always ask them what they want. You have to just sometimes say, I think this is a great idea, let's just implement it. So a lot of what I do specifically is around where the brand is today and taking that heritage and how we can bring it into the future.
We have time for one last question.
Thanks. The project manager in me wants to know about how many active projects would you be managing, you and your team, at any one time? And also, are they custom, sort of big vision, strategic projects, or are they tracking studies that you've done time in and time again?
We do a lot of editorial, so we have to ascertain kind of where consumers are. Do they like everything that's in the magazine, and likelihood, you know, the key metrics, likelihood to recommend, likely to subscribe. That being said, I work on a lot of new business development, so trying out new products and things for each of the 9 publications, as well as I'm in charge of all the research for the books, because we have a huge books department. So
how many active studies is that going on at one time, and how many
we
staff?
have? Well, the summer was insane because we had to gear up for the fall getting the budget ready for 2016. So I think we had like 20 studies going on at once. A lot of it we do ourselves in Qualtrics. We program and blast ourselves. Some of it we send out to vendors, stuff that we can't do, like ANU tracking studies and things that we can't do internally. So at any given time now, we have, it's slowed down. Maybe we have 9 or 10, but over the summer we were actively 20, constantly going on different things.
And how many staff managers do you have?
I have a team. I have a couple of people, and you know, like it took us a while to get in a groove, and we've had some days, you know, we pull your hair out just like anybody else. But I think now that we have it kind of set up, well, what I do is at the beginning of the year, I set up the schedule for the whole year when things have to be deployed, so I know when things are going out. There are very few things for me personally that are a big surprise, like, hey, I need to get this research done, because I try to plan it from the beginning of the year. So try being the operative word.
How about you, Tina?
We don't have as expeditious process as you do, kind of more sometimes reactive. I work in a corporate role, so the projects that my team works on are all the advertising tracking, all the brand tracking, but other highly strategic projects. So we have, like me personally, I probably have about 5, but they're huge. But the team, the team that we have here, which is about 7 people, there's probably about 12 in total, and they're ginormous. But they're like voice of customer and you know, for the consumer and the commercial business. So and then there's product studies, but very few and but meaty. Yeah.
I won't even venture a guess on a number because it's really hard because there's so many. There's a lot of small things, there's a lot of big things, so it really depends. You know, we do things across brand, content, media, and sports, and we look at those 4 core areas, and there's projects that are huge and strategic, thinking about the future of youth in sports, which could take, you know, months on end between different phases, and then there are things that are more tactical, like what do we name this product, you know, this video product. So it's really hard to say. We have a team of 5, so you could kind of do some of the math and figure out what's realistic and then still go home on a Saturday or Sunday. So, but it's, and then not to mention, that's all the primary stuff. And then we get a bunch of syndicated things that we also have to leverage and manage in addition to like ongoing tracking studies. Again, the key thing for us is just triangulating all the different sources we have. So it's more fluid. And then fourth quarter tends to be our busiest. Like today is NFL, Monday Night Football. We have a project happening tonight. So I think I've got 5 more minutes before I got to go. No, I'm just kidding.
Marcy.
We tend to, there's only a staff of 4 of us in our research department, so we're fairly small, and we hit a number of different products and different divisions within Genry. So I don't know, I couldn't give you a number at any given day how many are going on, but I can say for myself, for example, the projects I tend to work on tend to be really big, and it could take 6 months to get one project done, and I may have 2 or 3 of those going on at the same time, but I would say a lot of our work actually goes into it even after the project, the data collection piece is done and the analyzing is done. It's rolling it out to all, we have international offices, and you'd be surprised at how many people in Japan want to know what's going on in the US. It boggles my mind, but they do. And so whatever we come out with something, it's sharing throughout the company. So they tend to be large.
So it's not just collecting it, it's also disseminating.
Yeah, I think that's one of our big challenges is sharing the information in a way that isn't, I'm not giving them the book. You know, I'm giving them the bits and pieces. And again, I work with actuaries and they love numbers. So they would just look at numbers all day, but they'll miss the story. So it's trying to come up with a story. So a lot of my time goes into taking the data that a vendor sends to me, synthesizing it and coming up with what is the actual point that they need to walk away with, and not bogging them down with numbers, because trust me, they will love all the numbers and they will question every number I put in front of them, but they're going to miss the point.
Can I reinforce that? Because there's a project that we finished I think a year ago, and we're still evangelizing throughout the company, because we think there's no substitute for it. So like in person, connecting the clients, and that's a big part of what we do. And sort of another mantra, you maybe heard my VP talk about at ARF. He said, marketing to research is just as important as the market research.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time making sure if research is, you know, done and nothing tangible happens, then what was the point of doing it? So we make sure that our clients, again, to the Maya Angelou quote, are feeling what we're doing.
Thank you, client panel. Before we break for lunch, I just want to remind you to visit